Hi, Silke, and hi everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Nora, and I'm from Businessmap. And today we have our very much valued partner Silke from New Zealand. Hi, Silke. So this is one of our series, Talk with Experts and Partners, and today we're going to cover the topic of intercultural agility. Our goal in Businessmap is to share knowledge and to share experience. So I hope that you enjoy this episode of Experts Talk. And I would very much like to introduce Silke, as she has one of the most colorful backgrounds that I have ever encountered. Really? So
it's very colorful in the back here.
In the background, yes, but also life-wise. So Silke is actually passionate about intercultural agility. She has a very diverse background. She is a book writer. She is a Businessmap partner. Silke does a lot of workshops, and she is a speaker at events. And also she builds and maintains a community in New Zealand and Australia. So I think that's a lot so far. But Silke, if you want to jump in with a few words about what you do.
Oh, that sounds so exciting. I don't perceive myself like that. I just really do stuff that I love, to be honest. So I think I see myself professionally with two specialties or special topics, which is intercultural communication and Kanban. And I love both. I love both of them because they are very contextual. You cannot learn these things by the book or as a recipe. You really need to understand context and the toolbox. I use a toolbox that you use. It's all interlinked, so it's not linear because we humans aren't linear. We are rather complex. And this is all about people at the end as well, and culture. And that is, that's what I really love. And I do lots of things to just bring this out to the world, really, like I do today. I for a long time, I was a trainer and a coach, a consultant in these topics. Also, I've written a book. 2 books, actually, one of them, both in German, one of them got translated into English, and I'm currently writing a new book that just came to me in the last 2 weeks. And I haven't been a speaker because when I speak, I think I need to be really passionate and there needs to be the story in my head. And now I actually have this, it's an interactive talk that I've given and that I will be giving. It's about intercultural agility and lens on ways of working. So really combining those 2 topics. And it's not just about Agile Kanban, but actually even normal project management and things like that. And, or traditional, not non-traditional project management. And that really came to me, and it took me a long time. I've been an intercultural trainer for 12 years. It took me a long time to find that talk that is short, but still at depth, to justify what this topic is really about, because it's not superficial or shallow. And so it's currently developing into a little workshop that I'm running in conferences, and I will be definitely at DevOpsCon Berlin. I have also applied for another conference, but that's not confirmed yet, so I'm not talking about it.
Okay, thank you very much. So yes, if you want to see Silke give this talk at Berlin, that would be great. And you have, if I can share, you have a diverse background. So you started from banking, then some product management. You also do work with a lot of people from other countries as you're a host on Airbnb. So what is your intercultural approach, let's say, when it comes to work? How have you build your approach to intercultural work with this background that you have and your work with people?
So when we talk about intercultural training, communication, there are lots of interculturalists, I call them, in the world that have done a lot of research and that are a lot smarter than myself, because I only just use what they've done, what they've researched for my own training. There are quite a few out there, and each of them does it from a different angle. And we trainers use all of those perspectives and research to teach that topic. What's generally similar is that we look at values or patterns in cultures, and we look at them relative to each other. So it's very rare. There is only one interculturalist, Alexander Thomas, who looks at particular values in a particular culture. But other than that, it's always like a range. So for example, a culture can be more or less hierarchical or more or less direct in communication. And your culture will be somewhere on that spectrum from 0 to 100%. And if it's perceived as very direct, for example, from one point of view, it can be as indirect, perceived as indirect from another point of view. So I basically know of these patterns that I need to look at, and I always have them in the back of my mind. So that's the lens that I'm looking at when I see situations. So when I'm working in teams or when I've got Airbnb guests coming through, I kind of already know their cultural background. And sometimes I'm just curious and I ask, because sometimes you can't actually see it really. You know, people these days sometimes look different, and they might have multiple cultural backgrounds, you know, by parents that come from two different backgrounds. They might have grown up somewhere else. So you cannot always say. So it's always really interesting to ask someone about their story and just be curious. But these patterns definitely give an idea where I can see when they, for example, in teams, when they interact each other, where there is a potential for conflict, or if something's happening and there is a conflict, I usually see a little bit more than people who don't have that knowledge in the background.
Okay, so what would be an example of a direct culture, a more direct culture? Would that be a Western culture? Or
it's hard to say. So, I would say Asian cultures are rather not so much on the direct part of the communication. I mean, Germany is definitely in one extreme. Israel is even more direct. But you cannot really say Western, because, for example, England, they talk between the lines. It's not necessarily, you can't really, sometimes you can, but for that spectrum, it's actually not that obvious.
Yes, it's not black and white, let's say, Western, it's Eastern
never.
cultures.
And it's also not, because in the end, we are all humans.
Right, of course.
And, you know, like for myself, whereas from a Kiwi perspective, New Zealander, here I'm a German in New Zealand. For them, I'm probably still quite direct, but I have learned to be quite charmingly not so German. I'm trying, you know, and I actually succeed sometimes. And so when I communicate in that way, because I've learned it and I'm trying to be conscious about it, when a German hears me, they're like, why don't you say what you mean, you know?
Right.
And when I'm in Germany, they might not understand me anymore, because I'm not bluntly saying what I mean, you know? And so you definitely, when you live somewhere else, for example, it's not necessarily, but often you adjust a little bit, and sometimes even consciously. So some values that you bring with you you can consciously keep them or consciously try to give up on them.
Right. Yes, that's quite interesting. I've noticed also like your personality changes depending on the language that you speak. For people that speak more than one language, when you speak English, Spanish, for me, Bulgarian, I kind of think it's, I feel, and I also think it's valid for other people that some personality traits change depending on the language that you speak. So I also think that's interesting.
I'm not sure if it's the personality, but it's definitely your communication style somehow.
Probably.
Yeah, I agree with that. So when I talk Italian, I definitely talk more with my hands.
Yes.
So it's like, va bene, va.
Yes.
Like that.
It's normal.
And when I talk French, there is a bit of a pride about the language, and it's maybe a bit softer. And there is more emphasis on the language. You don't just say things. It's actually, it's an art somehow.
I agree.
And German is just what it is for me. So like, I don't think about that really. And it's not, I don't think it's just, but I think it can come across as hard. But then I've heard different, like the opposite as well, that for some people it sounds rather soft, which I find that surprising, but that's a different perspective. So I don't know can't remember what their background is, but.
Right. I would say it's hard to learn. I don't know how it sounds, but yes, I can say the same for Bulgarian. Like many people think it's just very, hard as pronunciation. But so you said that, some people are more direct and some are not. So would this lead to some maybe conflict or misunderstanding when it comes to, multicultural teams? Have you encountered such?
Yeah, and not just that. I mean, there are other things, like, for example, actually there is one spectrum which is about relationships versus task orientation. So some people really are there. So you appreciate a colleague at work who's performing well, even if you don't know them well. And in other cultures, it's very important that you actually get to know that person. So the relationship behind it is very important. And even if they don't perform so well, if you've got a good relationship, you'll still work with them. And this is, for example, really crucial for salespeople. Because in some cultures, the relationship building takes quite a lot of time, and it's very important. If you skip that, and someone from a task-oriented culture like Germany is, I'm just thinking of other cultures that are that way. I think, well, let's talk like Germans definitely, but there are others as well, like Scandinavians also. But you can't generalize either. So yeah. But if you know about this, then you can play with it. And for those, it's easy to skip this relationship building part, because they just want to talk about the contract. They want to get down to the topic. And it's all about performing. We're producing a good product. We've got the best services in the world. So why would you not sign a contract with us? But if you skip that relationship building, they would totally sign a contract with someone who is maybe second best.
Okay.
And who understands that.
Yeah, when you're saying this, I actually, there are some AI tools on the market that, when you go to the profile of the person and it tells you what is the personality and what should be your approach. Like you have to be more chatty, more friendly, or you have to be more direct, more professional. So I don't know if this all makes sense. I guess they're just taking all the posts that the person have and their ways of speaking, etc. But I don't think that this tool can actually replace knowing the person, seeing the person, and deciding your approach personally for the situation and, the person that you're speaking with. I don't know, what is your opinion on such tools, for example?
Well, I've seen some of those summaries about people. They weren't
Yes.
bad, I guess. I'm not sure. I haven't really, I must admit, I can't remember them in detail, and I cannot remember if they had some of those intercultural classifications in them. AI is definitely something that is also entering intercultural communication, because, one part, and that is the part where it's more about skill transfer rather than knowledge transfer. It's where, I often have people in my classes and they just want to know the do's and don'ts. And of course, there are do's and don'ts in a culture. But I'm just looking up that what I was what I was looking for is those do's and don'ts. So you can probably, as of today with AI, get or teach knowledge transfer, not so much competency. Because competency needs a bit more of a human, and so those do's and don'ts, which would be more like that knowledge part, you can Google that already, and I guess AI will become even better in that. And that is something, for example, in the future that we might just offer as pre-work, but that will not help you when you are working in a different culture. When you go with do's and don'ts and what can I do not, or what I'm allowed to do, you will still go into all these traps that there are, because you haven't really understood where that's all coming from. You haven't understood the culture at depth. You haven't understood where that these patterns are coming from, and also what's actually crucial, and how what you learn in a really good training class is that you learn about your own culture. And that is actually the most important thing, because that's how you see the world. So you can only see and perceive in another culture what you can see through your lens.
Right. That's
And so if you know do's and don'ts in a culture, that doesn't give you the full picture. Like, for example, if we think about this hierarchical thing or pattern, I've got this example when I came to New Zealand, and I was really surprised that in the testing consultancy where I worked, I was really surprised that there was this, I call it ivory tower, like a glass box where some white men were, not only old, also younger, but white men, and us little soldiers on the bench working outside. I didn't know this from Germany, and I was surprised to find it in New Zealand, because I have perceived Germany and also New Zealand as rather flat hierarchies, and that being said, that a German would actually contradict, because there are some hierarchies that we have somehow in organizations, but it's, again, compared to other cultures, it is a rather flat culture. And so I digged into my intercultural brain and was like, well, yeah, actually, this is a British organization, right? And English, actually, not even English is the correct term, not British, because there's differences in the UK as well. It's an English organization, and they have a class system. And that's where that hierarchical sense was coming that I was feeling. And then I asked my Filipino colleagues, and I was like, don't you find this weird that these guys are there and there's like a glass box and we are out here? And they were like, that's normal, isn't it? And so they are coming from an Asian country, and it's very normal there. they have these hierarchies. So through their intercultural lens, they didn't see that. And I saw that very clearly through my German lens, who's rather flat. And so this is a really good example where it's more important actually to understand where you are coming from. And when there is a conflict, the first thing that happens is that there are emotions coming up.
Right.
And you need to not respond directly, but capturing them and being conscious about them and thinking about what's going on in me. Why is this happening in me? You know, because it's you. It's not that. It's not them.
Right.
Because most people don't. It's probably completely unconscious for them. They have just acted in their normal ways and didn't mean anything malicious or so. Yeah.
Right.
Didn't mean provoke or whatever.
Right. So in this case, let's imagine that I'm, for example, a leader in an organization. There is a conflict. So there are like multiple cultures involved in this conflict. So what would be best if I just first approach things from my culture's perspective and then try to understand the other people's, or just like make an overview of everything that is happening and then decide what would be my do's and don'ts in this situation? As from what I understand, do's and don'ts are not like written in paper, something that you have to apply everywhere.
It's really context. It really depends on the situation and who you've got in there. There is no out-of-box solution. But I think I would tend to speak to the people in person first, like individually, and not as a team. Because there are some cultures where talking about this in a team, they would lose their face, and then there's nothing you can do anymore. So I think the first thing would be to talk to them individually rather and get a sense of what's going on. And maybe by doing this, you can already see the different perspectives, and it might become obvious to you what the conflict actually is, and that, you know, it isn't a conflict, but it is one, you know.
Right.
And it might be something completely trivial happening, which you can explain through the intercultural lens. And you need to understand the people first. And then what you can do then is like a session with everybody with their consent, if it applies. But sometimes you might have to stick with the individual. So you see, it really depends. You have to be sensible about it. But generally, what always helps when you actually have a new multicultural team would be that right from the start, before it even happens, that you decide on policies for that team about what's important for us, and that's where, you know, we dig into Kanban policies just from a different angle. Policies that work for everyone, what's important, and you can totally link that to what's important in your culture first. So they can, from a neutral point of view, say what's important in their culture, how they would work in a team, and then you can bring this together and build like a culture by design in the team.
Okay, yes, this definitely makes sense. I think, especially for new teams. So that's a good advice. And you mentioned the Kanban policies. So since you're a trainer, how would you say that Kanban and Agile principles apply into this multicultural work that you're doing?
So this is what my workshop or Intercultural talks about, right? And I actually let people. I don't give the solution. I let people discuss it, because it's all about, you know, the essence of Kanban is meaningful conversations, right? And that's what I do in this case as well. And so it's really important that people reflect upon it, and that I'm not telling them. But for example, when you look at perception of time, there are cultures who have a linear perception of time. You do one thing after the next. Love planning, we love to being structured. We have a question-answer pattern. We don't interrupt in a conversation.
Okay.
And then there are other perceptions of time, which might be cyclical or parallel. Parallel people can do multiple things at the same time, like Italians. Cyclical, I mentioned, where things just happen again and again, like the reincarnation. And so that's more like a cyclical. It's not cyclical cultures are often event cultures. So they go by event rather than by the clock.
Okay.
So it's event time versus clock time. And so when you do like classical project management with planning things long in advance, that might just not really work well with people who work in cyclical time or, event time, because it's natural to them that things happen along the way. Life happens, and things happen in project management as well. And when so that classical project management definitely works well in linear cultures, and they get into that. But then maybe you need something like Kanban as an improvement method to blend into project management, to actually account for real life, because that's what we do in Kanban with the last responsible moment, where we consider that things will happen until we actually get started. And so I think Kanban, with a lot of things, blends well into all of those different ways of working, depending on what you need. Whereas some of those ways of working, which are a little bit more prescriptive or frameworks, might not go well with cultures that are contradictory of that.
Right. Okay. So what would be, let's say, your advice for organizational leaders or organizations that are trying to adopt, for example, Kanban or Agile or Lean methodologies when they're working with diverse teams or global teams? What would be the best things that they could do when applying Kanban? Is there something that they should avoid, for example?
Can you repeat that? Sorry.
Yeah, of course. What would be your advice for organizational leaders that want to apply Kanban or other Lean or Agile methodologies to their global teams? Is there something that they should avoid, for example, when they do this?
I would go with methods that are not frameworks, that are not set in stone, which are not like prescriptive processes and roles. Because if it's more flexible, which is what Kanban is, it's not a framework, it's not a methodology, you can use Kanban a lot more in all sorts of cultures, because you can just adapt to the context. And I said that at the very start, that's what I love about Kanban. It's contextual, and you can allow for that specific culture. And by the way, it does not need to be culture in terms of country. It can be corporate culture as well. All those patterns that we use in intercultural communication and intercultural topics, that they are absolutely applicable also for corporates. Like if you take the hierarchical one, that's probably the most obvious one. And so given your context, and that's what we always do in Kanban, what fits us? What can we do to improve what we actually want to improve? It's like always like where's the pain point first? We don't just apply a framework.
Okay. So how do you think, or do you have any experience in, for example, how how different teams or multicultural teams react to, for example, visualizing work? Do they want to visualize their work or rather not?
It's a tricky question, yeah. So there are definitely cultures who would not like to have that in the first place. Because they would feel like, and by visualization, by the way, that's not a Kanban thing only. Yeah, that's through transparency. Let's call it transparency.
Right.
It's not about visualization, maybe it's about transparency. So if you mean transparency, it's potentially not well perceived by some cultures because they do not like to, they feel like they are being observed, they could do something wrong. There is not necessarily a safe to fail. You can't assume this. It is hyped by agile methodologies who come from a Western world that this is the way to go. But when you look at hierarchical cultures, for example, there are twists to that you have to consider. And so you have to be cautious with that. But I wouldn't be able to give a solution here right now, but you're totally right that it is a thing that needs to be taken with cautious. But what we do in Kanban, which fits really well, is the way we make things transparent and the way we visualize is we visualize the work and we let people self-organize around it.
Okay.
That is the crucial point in Kanban that makes it actually feasible across cultures, in my personal opinion. Because it's about the work and everybody can contribute to that. And that is kind of a little bit of a workaround to that transparency and visualization. Because no matter where you are in a hierarchy, it's about the work. We want to get the work done. We want to make our boss happy if there is a hierarchy. Right. And that is the crucial point here. And but that, like when you look at the traditional way of running a stand-up in Scrum, where it's on the people, and that is like, as opposed to the Kanban stand-up, or we call it Kanban meeting, where we walk the board from right to left and it's all about the work. That is actually flow efficiency versus it's on the people, the 3 questions. What am I doing today? Blah, blah, blah. That is resource efficiency. And that spot on the people, it might or might not go down well in hierarchical organizations, because it is a point for them where they can actually show off, but that's not what is actually intended by the Agile community.
Right. Okay. So you would say that
really it's not easy. It's not an easy topic, but it's definitely something to look at when you are working in multicultural teams.
Right. Because I've heard a lot of things. The one that you mentioned, that people are feeling watched or maybe micromanaged somehow when they're visualizing their work. They don't want to make mistakes, or they just don't want this, kind of extra work that they do to visualize it. So it's quite interesting. And what you said about the daily meetings on the people versus the work that we do. So I would say that maybe some principle would apply better to one team and another principle to another team based on the people inside of the team.
The word micromanagement is a good one here. So micromanagement will probably be more perceived by people who are from less hierarchical cultures. Okay, so flat. And that is where a leader from a hierarchical culture might have a difficult time, because he will want to support them. He's used to knowing about everything because he's the boss, He's the But when someone from a hierarchical culture like this lands in a Scandinavian country, for example, they feel like, he's all over the place. He's all over us. He's controlling us. We don't have freedom. What the heck's that? Yeah.
Right.
Whereas someone from a leader from a culture that is more from a flat culture like German and Dutch, Scandinavian, they land, for example, in a South American culture or Asian culture, and they respect that leader for giving them direction, for knowing what he's doing. That is that's how he's perceived as a leader. So they want directions from them. So micromanagement, totally fine. What we perceive as micromanagement. They want that. And that makes him a great leader.
Yes, that's interesting. Yeah, because most of the times it's perceived as a bad thing, but obviously sometimes it can be a good thing depending on the people that you work with. So yes, that's quite cool, I think, how you perceive things.
You need to find that common that common way how you want to work together, because that is definitely a potential source of conflict when you start. And then you need that intercultural expert potentially who comes in and points you to that, because it's not obvious for you as you're sitting in that situation, and then finds ways how for both sides to understand it. And understanding is the very first thing, and then work out a way how you can work together so that there is mutual respect.
Yes, mutual respect it's I think one of the most important aspects maybe when you work in such an environment. Okay, and I would also like to talk about your books, because you're a book author, and recently you've contributed to another book which is called Global Cultural Interplay, and right now you're also writing another one which I'm not sure if we can say the name yet. So can you just tell us a bit more about the books, how we can find them and what they're about?
Yeah, so I can show you the ones that I have there just behind me on the table. So the two German ones. So this is more like a booklet. And this is the book.
Okay.
They're both in German, these two. And this is the English translation of that actual book here.
Okay.
And Global Cultural Interplay. I've got it here somewhere. Yeah, here it is. On top, because I just read it myself. And I'm very honored that I was able to talk from a New Zealand perspective in that book, because I find when I wrote that first book, the blue one, I found that New Zealand in international intercultural literature is highly underrepresented, probably because most people think it's somewhat like UK or like Australia. There's lots of things about UK and Australia. And so I was really glad that I was able to kind of put the flag up here and be recognized as a country or a culture that is different. So really honored and really thankful that Osnat, the author, contacted me. And so the new book is also in German. I was approached by a German publisher. The title is from a series called Fettnäpfchenführer Neuseeland, which means something like Clanger Guide to New Zealand. So it's more like, as a tourist or someone who's coming to New Zealand, what can you do wrong? And it's like a storytelling kind of way, with some protagonists that arrive in New Zealand in some ways, with little boxes with additional information in the actual storytelling. And at the end of every episode, there is the question, what's gone wrong? What could she have done better? And so when I was actually approached on a similar format a few years ago, and I declined because it was too shallow for what I'm doing. And for this one, they actually invited me because as we were talking, they invited the deeper stuff. Not me, but the deeper stuff. And they said, that's actually really interesting. And we want more of that, because I think the first book, the one of the feedbacks was that it's too shallow, you know? And so, whereas my first reaction was like, nah. A few days later, I was like, well, if anyone writes this book, it probably has to be me. Yeah. So I'm writing right now. Until June, 300,000 characters. And I hit just over 100,000 today. So let's see. And I hope that...
Well, you're getting there.
Not running out of topics.
Yes.
It's not... I don't think it won't be translated into English. It's going to be in German only. Yeah.
Okay. All right. And I think let's finish this conversation with maybe your advice, because here on one of the books that you showed, I see it says elevating the business success across cultures, which is also quite interesting concept and what we were talking about. So what would be your piece of advice for, organizations or leaders that have those intercultural teams? What if just one piece of advice that you could give, or one piece of knowledge of how they should change their mindset to be successful in such business environment?
I can only just tell anyone, book an intercultural training. either a cultural awareness training, which is across cultures, or culture specific. If you're going to a new country, it will definitely make a difference. And for example, those cultural awareness trainings, they are really good for team building. Like instead of booking from a facilitator a traditional team building day or whatever, or half a day, make it an intercultural workshop, especially when you have multicultural, multinational team members, like coming from all sorts of countries or cultures, especially then, because it will save you conflicts in the future. It will build a common understanding among the members around culture in general, and also their own culture and culture of the members that are in the group or in the team. I can definitely recommend that. A specific one, not really, because you do need to acquire that competency, really. I said knowledge before, it's really a competency.
Okay. So your advice to be just to gather the team, and maybe with a professional to do this team building that is focused on
work with someone who's a trainer or
right. Yeah, it's important because
at least read a book about it. At least read a book about it.
At least read a book. Okay, so that's the first step. Read a book.
You know from your own experience, participating in a training which is interactive and where it's like it's about awareness, and you've got these wow moments in a training, a book can't replace that, really. But the book is the minimum. A book is the minimum you can do.
Minimum preparation, let's say. And then you can go ahead with the next steps. Okay, so team building, maybe a workshop that everyone participates would be a good start. Okay, thank you very much. I think that's a very valuable piece of advice. Thank you, Silke, for the conversation, and enjoy your evening.
Thank you.